You know, I have a lot of media I fixate on. While yes, the main one is of course animation, there are plenty of other pieces of media that I do try to keep up with. Sitcoms, musicals, stop motion, a lot of just general TV. One of those pieces of media I've been heavily getting into is puppetry. More specifically, the Muppets. 2023 specifically, I've been getting into their history, different YouTubers talking about the subject, the Muppet Show, and especially their movies. So I started thinking, a dangerous pastime, I know, and came up with something. What if I were to review a Muppet property each December? Every week, a good short-ish video on one of their shows, movies, or anything else that comes to mind. And that's where this series comes in. I'd like to welcome you all to a new tradition on the channel. After 5 straight seasons, no one would have suspected at the time that of all things, the Muppets would be getting their own feature film. The first Muppet movie is something I considered the one that started it all. Sure, the Muppet Show pretty much laid the foundation, but this was their chance to truly experiment like never before, to up the stakes for these characters. Does it go well? I mean, you're watching this, so yeah. Essentially acting as an origin story for how the whole gang met, there's that chance to give the audience something they've never gotten before with the original show. World building. For both fans and general audiences, these characters, despite being puppets, both act and feel like real people. The interactions, the dialogue, the characters they play all seem more for actors than puppet. That's not saying that there aren't any wacky moments, there are, but it feels more grounded. Speaking of feel, the jokes also feel different too. Maybe it's because I've been conditioned to the same type of humor as of late, but there's something refreshing about the jokes here. They aren't so good they make you lose breath jokes, but they add that charm to the movie's runtime. Quick ones, running gags, fourth wall breaks, they're all here and they're all great. The original movie does also attempt to lay groundworks for quirks of future Muppet movies and projects. Plenty of music, which we'll get to, but also tons of action set pieces and special guests. In fact, it's filled to the brim with guests here, as opposed to your typical Muppet Show episode. Major stars like Dom DeLuise, Steve Martin, and even Orson Welles are here, and the roles all fit, making the movie feel like not a product that the cast and crew had to make with these stars, but a passion project with people they always wanted to work with. I'll say this though, this one does feel like the most tame of these movies. I know, rich coming from the Muppets of all things, but other movies go on to adapt stories and grab from different source materials. When looking back on this one, it does feel like a collection of Muppet Show sketches filled over an hour-and-a-half long runtime. Don't get me wrong, the story written for this movie proves that it's more than that, but I'd say a good 50% of the movie was for storytelling purposes and another 50% is to show that it is still the Muppets on screen here. Does it make this movie bad? Not at all. In fact, that idea that they don't let go of that original charm that made these characters unique is admirable and adds to the overall enjoyment of the feature. Even Doc Hopper is a good example of this as the movie's antagonist. Cartoonishly evil to fit in with the Muppet's signature wackiness. He doesn't go too over the top, but just enough where you can recognize him as a sort of threat. Look, he even has his own group of henchmen later on. That's not all. A major aspect of this and other projects by the Muppets is also the amount of practical effects they use here. Like I mentioned in my TMNT video, in a time before CGI was used in everything movie related, people had to really think outside of the box in order to get the effect they wanted. And with this being the medium of puppetry, you bet they had to go above and beyond for some of these shots, like Kermit riding a bicycle or the Muppets driving around in the Studebaker and the station wagon. Hell, even looking at them standing up is sometimes a marvel in of itself. Seriously, if you can find any behind the scenes on this movie, I highly recommend it. It goes to show that the team behind this had a major appreciation for the medium they were working with and attempted to carve this movie into a good example of them taking their craft to the next level. It's no wonder the Jim Henson Creature Shop is still a thing today when it comes to special effects and puppetry. This movie and several others show their legitimacy. With them working on projects like Blumhouse's Five Nights at Freddy's feature, it shows how far they've come since the 1970s. But a part of the movie that truly does make it special is the music. Half written and composed by Paul Williams, these are also another one of those quirks that future Muppet movies would also continue to keep. Most of these tracks in the movie serve some type of purpose, to represent to the audience a meaning with their lyrics and instrumentals, as well as adding a whole new level of enjoyability to the movie itself. And I wouldn't be doing this video justice if I never went over a few of them here. Rainbow Connection is iconic. From my point of view, it serves to act as a direct message to the audience, a message of hope to creatives, chasing that endless rainbow and finding others that believe in the same dream as you. In fact, its message is perfectly encapsulated in the movie itself. In its entire runtime, Kermit went from pursuing this dream alone to finding an entire crew of individuals that all share the same dream of entertaining people, funnily enough mirroring Jim Henson's success story. The song represents the value of finding and sharing passions with others in a world that isn't always welcoming to them, and I feel like it conveys this message throughout the movie really well. Moving right along is something more akin to a buddy duo song. like Road to Rhode Island from Family Guy. It's a song that helps accommodate the audience and adds more to the duo that is Kermit and Fozzie. I'd go as far as to say that it's also a picture-perfect mirror to Jim Henson and Frank Oz, the puppeteers for Kermit and Fozzie. It's no wonder that this was remade for their Green album years later, because in all seriousness, even though it isn't as well known quite as much as Rainbow Connection, it deserves to be recognized as one of the musical numbers that ended up putting the Muppets on the map in terms of film. There are of course other musical numbers that also capture that same musical prowess, like I Hope That Something Better Comes Along, and Can You Picture That being more in the field of camaraderie, and Never Before, Never Again being more in the realm of serious. They all come in different forms for any type of viewer, and there's something to appreciate for sure. So far you have a mix of many different types of things. The determination of making the film, the simple feel of the plot, the charm of its songs, but one thing's missing: the heart. Believe it or not, there was a reason why I wanted to make this series to begin with. These movies may look like kid stuff for some, colorful characters with song and dance sequences, but this one especially acts as a love letter to Jim's origin as a puppeteer, how he became so big with his creation and would continue to become big until his passing. It's why I feel like the first movie could only work as well as an origin story, because it essentially pays tribute to his whole team that he managed to find and assemble during his days making the Muppet Show. There's even a scene in the movie that perfectly represents what I mean. It's near the end of the movie where Doc Hopper stops the whole group one last time. We get this fantastic speech from Kermit about that heart I mentioned, and honestly the fact that this is still Jim Henson talking through him makes this moment that much more impactful, because it's essentially their creator talking about what he's built with other people.
Yeah, well, I've got a dream too, but it's about singing and dancing and making people happy. That's the kind of dream that gets better the more people you share it with. And, well, I found a whole bunch of friends who have the same dream. And it kind of makes us like a family.
The original Muppets movie can be slow-paced, but there's that sense that there was an attempt to give it more of a cinematic approach. Even rewatching it for this script, I ended up just enamored by it, because of how much it gripped me the first time. I'll add this though, this movie did mark the beginning of the end for the franchise in a way. Now I don't mean the movies dipped in quality straight after this, but the following years of movies and projects did significantly a lot for this franchise. New filmmakers taking over, the passing of Jim Henson, even the Disney buyout all happened because of what this film caused. They didn't know it at the time, but this was just one move that was gonna change the Muppets forever. With the first movie doing as well as it did, a sequel was of course always gonna be in the cards. But with an origin story already being checked off the list, the Muppet crew were gonna have to do something different. Way different. This is where the Great Muppet Caper comes into play. Similar to the first movie that helps introduce many of the concepts and attributes that would go on to be in the Muppets' future movies, The Great Muppet Caper is also a trailblazer in of itself, undoubtedly pushing the franchise further into its rightful place in entertainment. Being honest, this one's a lot more interesting than the first by a mile. The original movie is not bad, but I guess lacking. Here there's this genuine attempt to make sure that anyone who's watching is wowed from the start, from the hot air balloon scene in the opening to the final run-in with the jewel thieves. This one's just full of gags. You got your regular fourth wall breaks, but the movie feels smart with its quickfire jokes, like it was meant for adults at times. And I don't mean raunchy, but smartass humor. Not ones that everyone would get, but certain people would. Even in songs and locations like the Happiness Hotel, it's like a Gatling gun full of jokes. One has to make you laugh or even chuckle eventually. Something to add here is that Muppet Caper is also the first establishment of who are the main players in movies going forward. Sure, they change as the years go on, but we essentially get certain Muppets typecasted again and again, mostly being Kermit, Fozzie, Gonzo, and Miss Piggy. This isn't a bad thing by any means. They do give off great performances, and you know that Jim and the others bring their A-game here. It gives a spotlight to the crew's favorite and most iconic Muppets, and besides that, even future movies will continue to keep this type of casting. I also really do like the trio of Kermit, Fozzie, and Gonzo here. They all feel like they complement each other. Their dialogue, story, and personalities make the movie fun. My favorite moment with them that I also think proves this really well is the whole stepping out with a star scene. Not only does it have some pretty creative filmmaking like the shadow sequence, but I get the feeling that the trio are at their best here. No extras, no distractions, just three buds enjoying each other's company. Some of the best jokes in the movie get given to them for sure.
When we thought identical twins working on a newspaper would make an interesting story.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't. Especially since you two guys don't look anything alike.
Well, that's because Fozzie's not wearing his hat. Fozzie, put your hat back on.
Oh, yes, sir. See?
Oh, yeah. I can see it now. But that's still no excuse for blowing the story.
Speaking of musical theater, this movie is also the beginning of having the Muppets become more actors than themselves. The first movie is an origin story, so that makes sense, but here it gets more and more obvious that they're meant to be roles played on a movie set than anything, something that the Muppets would continue to go even further with, but that's something for another video in this series to talk about. Even the villain, Mr. Holiday, is that special brand of cartoonishly evil like Doc Hopper from the last movie, but the guy who plays him does it really well. Keep in mind, this guy has to not only look at Muppets on eye level, but interact with them as if they were real people in this scenario. It's not an easy job by any means, but it's pulled off how you'd expect. That being said, some scenes definitely ride that line of creepy more than others.
We could have had something very, very special.
Whereas the first movie tried its best to give its characters their flowers on screen, each movie stands out on its own, bringing something different each time. Whereas the first one was full of plenty of heart, here we have another aspect: spectacle. There's more of that attempt to leave the audience dazzled like you would musical theater or opera. Even looking at some of the behind the scenes, they had to do some real outside the box thinking to get some of these shots done, all of which makes the movie 10 times more impressive. Even the musical numbers are special here, having their own originality and charm that comes with them. And of course, as I mentioned before, they all come with a side of spectacle too, feeling like mini music videos in a way. The opening number titled Hey a Movie is a prime example of this. It's sort of like controlled chaos in a way. There's always someone dancing, doing a pratfall, some cartoonish type violence. The whole setup is great, acting as just a sample of what to expect. I really enjoyed this one. I know I keep making comparisons in this review, but with this only being the Muppets' second film, it needs to be stated that what they've done here is special. It's like building a house. You need to lay down groundwork and foundation before you put up any walls, or else the place doesn't come out quite right. And this is very much the same. It worked in the unique aspect of the Muppet movies as well as its own unique additions to craft a movie that's worth watching over and over again. And in the end, the Great Muppet Caper got away with that and a whole lot more.
Hi-ho, Kermit the Frog here, and you're watching Disney Channel. Nice.
Bonjour, I'm Miss Piggy, and you're watching Disney Channel. Kissy kissy!
Muppets Take Manhattan is an interesting case when it comes to this part of Muppetsumber. Not only was it the movie I was most excited to go over when it came to the amount of movies I had to review, but it also might be my favorite of the Muppet movies period. There's that genuine attempt to try something new instead of building up what was previously done like the first movie, to give the audience and fans something to be excited about like Great Muppet Caper. When looking over each of these movies, even up until the newest theatrical ones, most of them, not all, but most of them follow a sort of formula or want to tick the boxes when watching them all one after the other. But here and the next one I'll talk about, it feels different, more experimental than ever, not in effects but in character and story writing. To put it simply, it tries to stand out, but how it stands out is what makes this my favorite.
What are we waiting for? Let's go to Broadway!
Manhattan stands out above the crowd in a few ways. Number one, Kermit himself. Up until Manhattan, the frog's always been the everyman, or I guess in this case, every frog? It doesn't matter. Point being that he was kind of the glue that kept everyone together, that kept his group from spiraling into fully fledged chaos like I pointed out in the last two videos. Here, the writing tried to expand his personality into something more. He has moments of wisecracking, coming up with plans. Hell, in the first 15 minutes of the movie, there's a scene that legitimately has him blow up at people because of the situation. Something the last two films never even attempted to do, and it's done very believably too.
I don't know. How should I know? Why are you always asking me anyway? Can't you take care of yourselves? I don't know what to do next. We failed, okay? We tried and we failed.
I know in the first Muppetsember video I pointed this out, but this has to be the most accurate mirror of what it must have been like for Jim to be the de facto leader back in the Muppet Show days, where everybody was relying on him and him alone to know what to do. And if this was ever the idea, then I'd say it's done well. And point number 2, this is probably the only instance, apart from 2011, that the movie focuses on the Muppets as an ensemble. The last two had the group meeting each other, but here they're given the chance to shine together brighter than ever, with almost all of them getting scenes either shared or solo, till the very end of the feature. Not just that, but it's also worth pointing out that this is the only feature from the Muppets not having them go up against a big villain of any kind. It switches up from the Muppets vs. X to the Muppets vs. Adversity. Being placed in the Big Apple, they're met with tons of obstacles that threaten them from reaching their end goals. Financial trouble, plans going wrong, even Kermit getting amnesia. That's where the interest in the movie lies for me. It's our main characters going up against the odds, not some antagonist, and honestly, I do wish that more movies in this franchise were framed this way too, because it does add to the humanity the writers of this flick were trying to give them. My favorite scene, not just here, but a top 5 in this franchise, is the Somebody's Getting Married musical number near the end. You gotta keep in mind that Jim Henson and Frank Oz both treated the relationship between Kermit and Miss Piggy like a legit celebrity relationship, and this movie was a sort of antithesis of this. It was treated like a whole will they won't they situation, even in interviews to promote the movie, with them, no joke, getting an actual pastor to do the ceremony for the wedding scene. But whether it's considered canon or not is still left up to the viewers. They didn't want to make anything overtly confirmed, which I do enjoy.
What better way could anything end? Hand in hand with a friend.
Out of all the Muppet movies, Muppets Take Manhattan does kind of feel like the black sheep of the franchise. You never really see it talked about as much as the movies before like Caper or after like Christmas Carol. And honestly, it's a damn shame. Trying something new doesn't automatically equate to a bad product, and this film acts as a prime example of that. I mean, really think about it. You have the full cast on display, human supporting actors that aren't bad guys, even the introduction to, again, another phenomenal and memorable song in the Muppets history with Together Again, and a fun premise set in one of the biggest cities around. Well, at least I can appreciate it for what it is, and I hope others do too. Well, we had to make it to a Christmas movie eventually. In full honesty, I've never really been that attached to the Christmas Carol story. I know the themes, characters, and story pretty well, and I've read it a few times as a kid, but it's never really been a story that's kept in my mind as much, mostly because I don't really celebrate the holiday like others. That being said, I do have more of an interest in Christmas Carol adaptations. Scrooge with Bill Murray, The Flintstones Christmas Carol, Bah Humduck, A Looney Tunes Christmas. Each of these and more have managed to convey the meaning of Charles Dickens' book in their own way, sometimes using it as a foundation and other times reenacting it almost word for word. But out of all of these, Muppet's Christmas Carol is one that a lot of people are apparently calling the most faithful to the original book. And after reading it again, yeah, I'd agree with that sentiment. Hell, it does seem like the adaptation that takes the most from this story, these characters. Hell, even some of the texts are taken word for word from the book itself. But each of these are given that Muppet flair to them to make it fit more with their world. It's a hard balance to keep when it comes to adapting anything. You need to ask yourself, is this taking just enough from the source without going too far? And is there enough original material for it to stand out on its own? Very few manage to do this perfectly, even well, but they do exist. I will say this is definitely one of the Muppets' most unique looking films though. From the set designs, the costumes, the camera angles, watching all these back to back, you do realize that there was an evolution to these movies up until this point. When the reins were handed off to Brian Henson, there's that feel that they wanted to do something different, but at the same time, something that felt like a project Jim would make, but at the same time, distinguished from the last few films. And here, they more than knocked it out of the park. That being said though, my biggest issue with the movie as a whole is the overall tone. Muppets movies always had a good balance when it came to enjoyability to both kids and adults. The younger crowd could watch them and enjoy the colorful characters, but the older crowd could also watch and chuckle at a lot of the jokes and dialogue. It's what made the Muppets show so successful when it was on. Here though, it felt a lot more toned down, more kiddish. There's not that many quick jokes for the older crowd. That's not saying that the movie's strictly for kids, hell no, but it is something that the other movies had in spades for sure.
Once again, it was Christmas Eve. Night was falling, and the lamplighters were plying their trade.
Hey, light the lamp, not the rat, light the lamp, not the rat!
My
what
apologies.
Are you doing? Put me out! Whistle! What? Ah!
When it comes to the actual aspects of the movie itself, the first thing that came to mind immediately is the scope of the whole thing. With a title like Muppet's Christmas Carol, you don't really expect the set to be built in the style that it's in. Of course reminiscent of Victorian London and filled to the brim with a mixture of Muppets and humans, surprisingly not clashing despite being in way different of a style. The characterizations for certain roles are also another thing that caught my eye here. Michael Caine, I feel, does capture Scrooge really well. From his stern and serious moments to his enlightened and joyful, Caine himself said he wanted to play the role as serious as possible, and it does come off that way on screen.
Take the day.
Please stop that! Thank you, Mr. Scrooge.
I also do like the way it handles Scrooge's arc throughout the movie. Keep in mind, the idea of A Christmas Carol is watching someone bitter and frustrated with life go through his biggest regrets in it, what he did wrong, essentially explaining to him and to us, the audience, how much importance holds for him to change. There are scenes where Scrooge legitimately feels regret, shame, anger, and near the end of the movie, true fear as he gets shown where his life path will end. It gets actually eerie at times. Then we have the ghosts of Christmas past, present, and yet to come. Honestly, my favorite portrayal of them in any special. The team behind this managed to give each one of the spirits their own personality and look. The Marley brothers are chained due to their past actions and guilt. The Ghost of Christmas Future is more in the realm of mystery, the present being more of welcoming and innocence, and yet to come is meant to look legitimately threatening, not even speaking a word to Scrooge the whole time he's on screen.
A life can be made right. Ebenezer Scrooge.
Not just that, but the other Muppets fit into their roles really well here. Kermit and Piggy playing the Cratchits, Fozzie playing Fozziewig, who I'm convinced was casted just for that name alone, even Gonzo being a good host as Charles Dickens himself, taking us through the story as it plays along, which was a nice touch. If there's anything this movie has, it's tons of heart. There's always that attention to detail, the want to entertain, to tell a good story, but to also be faithful to the book it's based on. And looking at it now, I say that it's a true claim to make, and Muppet's Christmas Carol definitely deserves its spot in the Muppets filmography.
Looks like it's gonna be a great day today to get some fresh air like a stray on a straightaway. Hey you, got a light? Nah, a Bud Light. Early in the morning, face crud from like a mud fight. Looky here, it's just the way the cookie tear. Prepare to get hurt and mangle like Kurt Angle rookie year. The rocket scientist with the pocket winders. Some even say he might need some psychiatrist. Doom, are you pondering what I'm pondering? Yes, why would the darn thing be wandering? She's just a foundling, barely worth fondling. My posse's on Broadway like Mama, I want to sing. Mad plays the bass like the race.